Hey friends, so a question I get all the time is about small talk. How do I make small talk better? How do I dread it less? How do I turn small talk into something substantial? I don't know about you, but as I get older, my tolerance for shallow, silly conversations has been dropping. So I wanted to share a quick clip from our People School office hours. So every month I do a live monthly workshop with all of our People School students where I teach new content, I answer questions, we look at drafts of log lines together. It's a great hour. We do it every month. And I answer this question in office hours. And I wanted to share it with you so you could get the answer, but also give you a little sneak peek into what People School has in store. So enjoy this clip on how to deal with small talk. All right, let's do some tips and tricks. So one of the things that happens all the time is we get into these small talk traps. So these small talk traps happen at work, at holiday parties, on Zoom calls, even when you're talking to friends where you're like, so how is the weather? Gosh, that traffic's been terrible. So where are you from again? These are like the most common small talk traps. I'm sure you have some others that constantly come up in your life. And so my push for us today is to think about what are the three small talk topics that come up most often in your life. Are there the topics that come up over and over again, either for upcoming holiday parties or for your work calls or when you're seeing friends? I want you to specifically identify them. And then I want you to think of at least another three great stories, great questions, great tips. And the reason for this is because we can't always be in control of what small talk comes up, right? Like our boss might hop on the call and start a whole discussion about weather, or our aunt-in-law, great aunt might come in from town and all she wants to talk about is, how this hometown has changed. That's all she always wants to talk about. You can't change them, but you can change you. You can be ready with a great conversation and response. And that's what I want you to be ready for, not only for this holiday season, but for next year. For example,
Am I the only one who enjoys conversations around the weather, by the way? I'm just going to throw that out there. I love talking. I think a spirited discussion about what weather you're having, what weather I'm having. I, I don't know. Nothing wrong with that. If you agree with me, let me know in chat.
I don't think I've ever heard someone say a spirited conversation about the
There's a lot to
weather.
talk about.
There is not a lot.
And that's why you don't think it's a good small talk conversation.
Mm.
It's rare that I make you cry when you laugh.
I know. It just took me by surprise. Okay. Okay. Anyway, hey, if you like your small talk conversation topics, that's great. That's great. You go. That's wonderful. But if you don't like your small talk conversations, here are some ideas. So, for example, I noticed when I lived in Los Angeles, everyone all the time constantly talks about traffic. Like it comes up in every conversation, the beginning, the middle, the end, everyone's talking about traffic. So I was like, okay, like I'm gonna get really versed on this. Like, I'm gonna have some great stories about traffic. So I read this book. I think you read it with me. It was fascinating. It is literally a book about traffic. And it's fascinating. He talks about fascinating patterns, he talks about driving patterns. And so whenever anyone brought up traffic, I was ready. I was like, well, did you know that a left blinker is used more than a right blinker? I was like ready to go with interesting facts, interesting stories. I had, favorite commuting activities I did. I was like, oh, last time I was in traffic, I listened to this great podcast. So I could pivot away from traffic into a podcast I was listening to, weird traffic patterns, the book Traffic, funny things you've seen in traffic. So any of these
there's
things you can do. Yeah.
there's one thing I actually remember from this book, and this is a real fact. And here's a pro tip. You can use this in your conversations too. It's polite. It's considered polite in the U.S. to merge early, right? You don't want to be the person to merge the last second because then you're considered cutting in, and that's considered rude
Yeah.
when driving. However, that's actually the best way to alleviate traffic. If you're not using up 100% of the lane space in all lanes, it's inefficient and it causes more traffic. So if you're that person that waits until the very last second to cut in, you're actually helping alleviate traffic faster.
And you can bet.
Not that any other drivers would see it that way, but scientifically speaking,
And that is how Scott changes lanes. Mm-hmm. You wait.
Backed by science.
Backed by science. And when he does it, he reminds me of that fact. So get versed. You can use these ideas, but other ones about your topic idea. Here's another one for you. So weather was another one that people would talk about a lot when I lived in Portland, Oregon. It's funny how like place affects what the small talk is. In LA, it was always traffic. In Portland, it was always the weather. Like always, it was the weather because weather was such a huge issue. So again, here's a bunch of different ideas. What's the worst sunburn you've ever had? Are you a winter, summer, fall, or spring in terms of personality? What are you?
I have no idea. I've never heard of that.
It's an interpretive question.
Oh, then that's why I don't get it.
I think I'm a spring. I I think you're
Fall.
a fall. I agree.
Okay.
Hottest day of your life. So I want you to think about your 3 small talk topics and at least 3 different ideas that you could pivot, change, make them more interesting. That is my challenge for you this year. I promise it will actually give you something to look forward to. I will tell you, when I read that book, Traffic, I was so excited when people brought up traffic. I used to dread it. I used to be like, oh, like when people brought it up. But after I read that book, I was excited. I couldn't wait for them to talk about it because I had lots of things to mention. Would you like to join us for our next class of People School? I do these office hours every single month for our People School students, where I teach topics I don't teach anywhere else. So if you'd like to join us, check out information on our next class at scienceofpeople.com/pschool.